thank you for everybody who's taken the time and have been generous with their time to join this webinar today. A big thank you to Dan, who's joining us. And again, he has always been very gracious with his time when he's kind of talking about digital marketing campaigns that they run at Equinox. So and you know they are reasonably happy customers of ours. So what I thought I'd do, Daniel, do you want to just like take us through a little bit how you do what you do at Equinox, and then I'll kind of introduce what we do at ProFundCom, and then we can get straight into the topic.
Sure. Yeah, we're a small team at Equinox. I've been there for 14 years. We are a hedge fund. And I think what we tried to do about 10 years ago was look at ways that tech could enable productivity gains and couple that with really good content. And I think if you go back a decade, mostly because of the regulatory regime that we have in our industry, there just wasn't that much marketing. There was certainly plenty of sales. And I think we know, whether it's how we're dressed or, the quality of a podcast, the content we put out enables feedback, and that feedback can be qualitative or quantitative data. So we knew that. We knew ways to kind of like, who is our target market and find those folks, whether it's road trips or databases. And we started doing more things with videos and different types of reporting, different digital tools. And I always knew that kind of last part was tracking, getting the data and kind of shoving it into the CRM such that we could have more effective engagement and outbounds. And so, yeah, we found ProFundCom about 3 years ago. We looked at Lead Forensics as well, but ProFundCom, with its integration and customization into our CRM, and Paul, who's a great guy, allowed us to do that. So now every single day we use ProFundCom. And yeah, so that forms this positive feedback loop where we're getting content on our campaigns, on our content, on our reporting, and that gives us insight in what to do next and how to target people, not just on geography or demography, but on their behavior. Who's looking at our stuff, when, etc. And so that's how it all kind of comes together for us. So that's kind of an overview.
Yeah, and essentially, just following on from that, where what we've seen and where our products come from, our product has essentially come from taking lots of marketing data. So whether that's your email data, that your campaign, the marketing campaigns you're running on your email, website, social, investor portal, video, Zoom, physical events, taking all that data together, then applying machine learning, behavioral analytics on top of that, and then on top of that, just sending signals so that the sales team can effectively, on the outbound, as Dan said, is the ability to then have better conversations and make better connections. So that's really kind of where I thought would be a good topic is, what makes a successful digital marketing campaign. Now, historically, most people will say, if you're a generalist marketer, oh, well, if I've got so many clicks on Google, or, if I've got so many likes, if I've got so many vanity metrics, that makes my campaign fantastic. Well, that's just complete BS, because what really in the fund world, and that's my background and Dan's background, and I think most people who are coming on the call, that's your background as well. It is how much money is marketing bringing into the business? How much money, how effective is your marketing in raising AUM? And at the same time is preserving money in the fund. So managing, tracking, money leaving the business. So, how can you track, if people are potentially going to redeem? So a little bit about ProFundCom. We've been going around for 20 years, whole bunch of clients that we have globally. We also spend a lot of time educating clients and prospects. So we run, we have a whole business that does reporting that sits around digital marketing, targeted at hedge funds, targeting at raising and preserving AUM, as well as focusing around fund distribution. I mean, these are our latest reports. We've got one coming out, so I think next week. So you'll all be hopefully getting a copy of that. So I think the most important thing for any fund manager is, or anybody in the marketing world, is not to say, here are some vanity metrics, but what are the foundations that build a go-to-market strategy, a digital go-to-market strategy, a digital campaign strategy, and it's all built, fundamentally around these 5 blocks. And if you ever was to do Fund Marketing 101, this is what I'd teach. It's basically, most people would say to us, and I talk to prospects and clients a lot, and I talk to a lot of charlatans out there as well, charlatan agencies, and they say, no, you need to have a great website. But the trouble with building a great website, where you spent all this money, people come over and ask, well, what does this, other than looking good, what purpose does it serve? So it won't, and the website fails, and 7 years later you do have a brand refresh because you have a new marketing director in, and the process continues, and you continue to fail in your go-to-market strategy. Well, the first part is knowing you've got to have a go-to-market strategy, and then you build out, your fund narrative. What does your fund do? What does it do it for, and why does it do it? The second part to this is brand awareness. What content are you creating, and how does it fit into your narrative? But at the same time, how does it target your ideal investor? And these are things that, you don't really need any marketing technology for. It's really hard work, but you've got to build these foundations up. Once you've done that, you've got to build out what we call the outbound, and that's your demand generation. So pushing data out on various social channels, various web channels, various digital channels, and then capturing the engagement, and then building out your analytics from that. And where the analytics, and this is the kind of thing that Dan was alluding to, become really important, is when you're actually on a regular basis creating content and then analyzing that data. And that creates an echo chamber, a positive feedback loop. So basically the analytics come in at top of the funnel, so people who are showing a level of engagement. And then what the trick really is then how do you build out what we call mid-funnel automations? So what a mid-funnel automation is as people are engaging with your content, whether it's website, social, investor portal, data room, all that kind of data, what signals are they then alerting you? So what signals are being generated that you can then alert the sales team to? And those mid-funnel automations are absolutely critical in keeping your people who are not going to invest with you, engaged till they come to a point till they invest. But at the same time, finding those people who are further down the channel, who with a call or a physical interaction would potentially, make an investment or at least have a face-to-face meeting. So, and where this has come about really, and where this is really easy, is if you've got great marketing campaigns. So, and obviously feeding the automation is kind of part of this. So this is just an example of an automation. So what I thought we'd do today is kind of look at how, we leverage content marketing, how we look at data-driven strategies, and this is kind of content ties into data. I have been asked a lot to talk about compliance, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So I think that'll probably take us about 45 minutes to go through. And if anybody's got any questions, just feel free to pop it in the chat, or there's a Q&A button, and Dan and I will try and answer them as we go through the presentation again. So the first part to all this is like everything is data. And I don't know, Dan, if you've seen, pre-post pandemic, how the engagement and content creation has changed for these various channels.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone's doing podcasts now.
Yeah.
We were in our house for 2 years just sitting around. So there were a lot of fund managers, portfolio managers going on, just name the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's become normative. It's become normative to have conversations like this by using Zoom and such. I also think there's been a advance in data visualization and reporting, and
Mhm.
I think there's a much higher institutional standard to show what your fund does, and really get down to the brass tacks of the drivers of performance, exposures, valuations, all those things. That's what we do as a fundamental manager. It depends on the strategy. I think, on the kind of awareness thing, and I think it's so important. This is what makes us much different. I remember speaking in our industry to Scott Calloway years ago. He's at NYU. He does branding and brand awareness and stuff. Kind of a vocal guy. And I asked him, how do you turn a hedge fund into a branded luxury product? And there isn't much brand. You can't drive around with hedge fund
Yeah, yeah.
unless you want to show people your statement. But there definitely is a luxury scarcity value to it. Not everyone is a sophisticated, qualified purchaser. And so I think giving investors that sense of credibility and authority and access helps build that kind of brand awareness, right? Because it is a luxury good. We're not 40 act funds. And so, and then when I speak to my peers in the industry, large and small, I think a lot of folks want to start integrating much better content and tie it into the data, just as you said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a question has come in, is the investor journey assuming a financial advisor, intermediary, or retail? And what that's a really, really good question. And what it is basically whether whether you're buying a fund, whether you're buying a pension, even if you just retail, you can't get away from the model of awareness, consideration, decision, service, loyalty. It doesn't matter. And this is all around, whether you're buying, a Louis Vuitton handbag, a Cartier watch, or you are buying something that's kind of outside, what you buy at the grocery store. And even changing your buying patterns. So if you're going to go from, Kellogg's to Scottish Oats, there is a whole awareness consideration element to that. And when people kind of say to me, oh, we're doing the website, and we're doing thought leadership pieces, and surely that should be enough. And it's like, yeah, that is enough to a degree, but then that needs to tie into your social media, your kind of PR, and that then has to feed your inbound, outbound marketing before even you get to that kind of the due diligence process. And I think why I think this diagram is so useful is, yes, it's telling you the investor journey is totally digital till they get to the point of due diligence. But even the service element now has become digitized as well. But that's a conversation for another day. But from your marketing campaign part, it's really important to understand that it is the awareness and the consideration part of this curve that you're spending your time and your energy on. And I think what makes it slightly different from the retail world is that the retail is not usually as a long tail cycle as it is from, say, something like a fund. And a really good somebody, I was recently in Austin, and somebody said to me, well, the great thing about marketing is my goal as a marketer is to find the 5% that are going to buy my fund this year, the 5% of my audience. I want to find those as quickly as possible. But the 95 that are not ready to buy yet, that I'm continually nurturing them through my automations. And that was a really interesting way to kind of see how, it's a kind of it's the whole how the long tail sales cycle works and how that maps into kind of classical marketing theory. So, and
Can I mention something on the retail real
yeah,
quick? That's it. I used to work at Sony Music. We had AC/DC, we had Britney Spears, we sold all kinds of records. And when you're selling that kind of brand image to millions of people, there's kind of a faux personal connection. There's like a mimetic desire, right?
right,
You bought Air Jordans not because you knew Michael Jordan. With hedge funds, the reason they're bought and not sold is some of the feedback you get isn't necessarily quantitative, it's qualitative. It's having the meeting with University of Texas and they say, here's how I view your portfolio. And getting that direct personal feedback from these very sophisticated investors then helps you craft that kind of engaging content. It's the same way they sell Ferraris. There's very few people who can buy a Ferrari, so it's a very personal experience. If you ever try to buy a Ferrari, I have too many kids to own a Ferrari, but so I guess the point would be there is the level of automation down that funnel kind of stops sometimes a little sooner, right? Because you have a smaller customer base, the universe is smaller, and you have to be a little more tailored.
Yeah.
Whereas in retail, it's, you know, the whole world, depending on what your target market is. And I think that might be a little distinct with hedge funds.
Yeah. No, and absolutely. And you know, it's that whole marketing concept, or TAM, totally addressable market, TAM. And you know, and that's why it is, you know, whenever you look at marketing books, it always addresses, you know, what's your TAM and how does that fit into your automation and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, look, no one's going to buy your fund because you've emailed them 7 times in a sequence, right? But you will be able to hopefully signal, you know, get signals to say, here's somebody who's definitely worth calling. We've got a question come in, Dan, if you're okay to have a is to say, what does this mean for the traditional institutional marketer in terms of, you know, how they carry on, how they do what they do, and then engage?
Yeah, I think a few things, and I said it in the very beginning. In every other industry, besides the alternative industry, because of obviously regulatory compliance hurdles, you're able to gather feedback, behavioral data. And this is why on Instagram or Netflix, right, content is created from the feedback, right? That's literally Netflix's model. Or if you have Instagram, you know, Coca-Cola doesn't say, let's just target people in, you know, the southern part of the United States, let's just do Texas. They can tell what the feedback is, and that's how they target you based on the behavior, not necessarily your demography or your geography.
Yeah.
So, you know, what we have in our CRM, and in our CRM, it's synced through API with Paul's data that we've customized for our process, is we can look at those institutional investors, get feedback on what they're looking at. And it's definitely different than what our 80-year-old, you know, high net worth clients look at. And so that's one way we break it down. It's not necessarily, hey, let's, you know, Kieran, who's a very capable member of our team, key lieutenant here, you know, you do consultants and I'll do endowments and foundations. We can look at all the institutions and who is that group that is the most engaged right now based on this ProFundComp data. And we can look at that in real time almost and say, you know, we should probably write this person back.
Yeah.
Or it looks like they really like our letters, or maybe we should do a video for them, whatever that is. And at least it gives you the granular information to call that person on the phone, wherever prudence leads you. And so I think that is a change. I think it's a change because it gives a marketing team far more scalability, because you're not just arbitrarily calling people on the phone.
Yeah. A question for you. What CRM are you using, Dan?
We use Dynamo. I think traditional CRMs, they're changing a lot. I know the team at Affinity, they're fantastic. There's a whole bunch of data scientists. I think traditional CRMs lack business intelligence capabilities. So it's kind of easy to like build a table but not a graph. And a lot of these, you know, look at Backstop or, you know, name the CRM, were created in a different era before, like, there was a lot of data transfers either through API or flat file, and ways to visualize the data. Now add on top of that AI, right? So the way we use Dynamo, and they have a very capable team, is get all these different service providers, and key one is ProFundCom, Dakota as well on the database side, to just shove in as much data as possible to make sense of it in one place in Dynamo. And I think if you have a CRM team that's willing to do that, because that's the future, baby, you know, it really is. And so that's what we're doing. We're kind of like tricking out, lack of a better word, Dynamo. But I think the incumbents not necessarily are in trouble, but some of the newer CRMs, I spoke with the CEO of Pinnacle the other day, they're really
Mhm.
trying to solve one thing, which is creating a sales productivity machine for us, rather than multiple silos that are very wide and not that deep. So we're happy with Dynamo. We've customized it quite a bit, and hopefully we can continue down that path.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully Lewis and John, we've answered your questions. Let us know if we haven't, and we'll get back to them. Yeah, because it was one thing, there was a point where, all roads led to Salesforce, right? And the thing is, they became the Goliath. And then more and more Davids have come along. Sorry for the Judeo-Christian reference there, but and you become in a David versus Goliath battle. But you find with domain-specific products like Dynamo integrated with Dakota and ProFuncom, it's like that combination becomes so powerful in that particular vertical, because you're not bending a product that was meant to be generic, even though you can do lots with it, like Salesforce, into something that kind of meets your needs. So there's a whole topic in generic versus bespoke products. But I think a Dynamo, Dakota, ProFund integration, you have domain specialists connecting all that information together, which is if the sum of the parts is bigger than their sum, so the total is bigger than the sum of the parts. So that's quite an interesting observation. But at the same time, like you said, Dan, I think all these CRMs were built in a time pre where the world is now, with lots of data, lots of AI, lots of people aware of the capabilities of AI. So yeah. So the other part to this, once you've created content, and I know we've kind of gone, we're slightly at a tangent with the CRM, but the really tough part for a fund manager is creating content. So repurposing content is, again, one of those things that is kind of really, really important. So, what we're finding with, most marketing teams are time poor, resource poor, content poor. And, the challenge of creating one bit of content is hard enough, let alone creating content for the website, for publications, for LinkedIn, for Twitter, or X as it's called now. So, one of the ways of creating really successful content and running campaigns is also around, having the tech in place, but again, feeding that brand awareness is where you can write your content once or create it once and then chop it up into shorter forms depending on the medium. So a really good example is, like, right now we are recording this webinar. We do it live. We don't do recorded webinars. We take the risk because people like Lewis and John can ask us questions. We then move to take this, we then give it to a copywriter. The copywriter will then create a white paper for us. The white paper is then distributed. We then take that white paper and chop it up into articles for industry publications and our website. And then from that, we have a team as well that then cuts up the articles and puts them as LinkedIn articles and as tweets as well. So it is quite interesting that even though the managers that we talk to are really under-resourced on the marketing side, from the content creation side, once you kind of get over the fear of actually, it's not about creating lots of content, it's about creating content once and then splitting it up many times for those channels. And again, once you've got your marketing campaigns running on multiple channels, you can then analyze those campaigns to see what's working, what's not working at the kind of the higher level, and at the lower level, being able to pull out signals to say, here are the people worth calling, whether they're prospects, whether they're investors. So this is actually quite the effect of having content and technology kind of running together. And the more people you're pushing this information out to, kind of the more data you're collecting. And what AI and machine learning love is lots of data. And then from that, you just build out signals. And then as time goes on, as people invest, where machine learning comes in is those campaigns will basically say, this campaign was cost us so much, it generated so many investors. And from the AI and machine learning, you can actually get your marketing to automate some of that content to say, here are the topics you need to be talking about because this generated the most AUM coming into the business. So repurposing content is really important because you have to feed the machine content. And I don't know, Dan, how are you going about creating content? Is it a static process? Do you do it once, or do you kind of do it on an ad hoc basis?
Well, I mean, I'd say that probably every hedge fund manager writes a quarterly letter. That's de rigueur. Everyone does it. Everyone has kind of a fact sheet. There's certain consensus items as a part of this professional sales process for any given hedge fund. What we've tried to do is, and maybe this comes from my kind of background in entertainment and just liking things other than finance, and I think having a very great compliance group here where we can do these things, is think about really our customer first. Like, look, if you're at, name the consultant, Cambridge, and you're getting hundreds of emails a day, and they're very long emails, and there's pitch decks and there's letters, certainly, if you're looking at fundamental investment managers, I'm sure that research analyst at Cambridge Associates reads all those papers in those letters. But if you look, it's pretty time consuming. So one thing we've tried to do is to build trust and credibility with our target market, that person at Cambridge, as the case may be, is try to give our investors and prospective investors a deeper look under the hood. So we do a series of videos that are about 5 minutes long called the Research Room. And so any kind of topical germane issue that we're speaking about literally in our research room, myself with a close friend and collaborator of mine, Stevie Reese, will put together these videos. We've done master classes. They're really high quality. They're not scripted, and it gets right to the point. So you don't have to spend like $50,000 to do a really, really boring video no one's going to watch.
Yeah.
And it tends to be the case that, exactly to your point, those very short videos, they take like 20 minutes start to finish, and they're only 5 minutes long at the end, is a compliment to the letters we're writing. I would say like that's kind of cool and unique, doing that kind of thing. And it's rapid, and from a compliance perspective, you can put it on LinkedIn or excerpts out on Twitter. And we did that with a masterclass for gold mining. And then the next thing I'd say is, like, I think there has been an increase in the ability to get very granular, accurate information and visualize it, not just a one-page fact sheet. And so we do that through Novus and we've looked at Lightkeeper as well. We've known these guys for, I've known them for 6 or 7 years. And the Novus product is unbelievable. It's really incredible. The team is incredible. And so if you're coming at an institutional investor, and you can't put this on LinkedIn because it has your performance on it, with, as I said in the beginning, the drivers of performance in a very clear narrative fashion with collateral that backs that up, where they can just watch it, 5 minutes, they're done. Great, I learned something. I think that builds credibility. So I guess the moral of the story is push it out into all the different channels that you think are relevant, but also think, like, what are some differentiated ways that I can create content that are scalable, that my peers aren't doing, that best expresses my strategy, right? And this really expresses the strategy of what we are, which is stock pickers in really odd markets. And we get great feedback. People literally tell us that it's good, or we can see the ProFundCom data. So that's how we approach content.
Super. And again, it's all around. And again, another way of saving time is, again, if you've got big aspirations for marketing, but a small team and a smaller budget, is to kind of build out automations. And the automations you build, again, are feeding that mid-funnel of people that are in your pipeline. So that, again, a very, very useful way of kind of taking, content, splitting it out, and not only repurposing it, but more importantly, redistributing it as well automatically. The other thing as well, when you're kind of running a marketing campaign, running one won't work. You've got to do it every day. You've got to think about it every week. You've got to think about it every month, and you've got to think about it every quarter. And the reason for that, it goes back to what I said earlier on, is that, you know, you've got to have to find those 5% who want to invest now, but you've got to take care of the 95% that will invest at a later time. And, you know, and the trouble is, you know, Mike Tyson has that famous quote, you know, everyone has a plan till they're punched in the face. It's like, yeah, you know, every marketer has a great idea. They'll put things in their diary, but then life takes over. And you just seem to lack, people seem to lack the discipline to actually have a spreadsheet, have a content plan, and sticking to that content plan. And it is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. We have a content plan, and it is hard work sticking to it, but you know, it's just the discipline to do it. And you know, as Tyson says, you know, discipline is doing the things you hate, but doing them like you love them. And I think there's definitely a case there where the marketer's brain is very different to an analytics brain. And because marketers are creative by nature, sticking to a schedule is a tough thing, right? So it is definitely worth having a content plan and just pushing yourself to be disciplined in how you follow it. Because the problem is, it's not as if you're in some kind of general company where you can just send emails out and campaigns. You know, there's approval to be done, there's compliance to be done. So to get things out timely, in a timely manner, a lot of you know, legwork has to go on beforehand. So this is quite an important, subtle but important part of how you build out, you know, successful marketing campaigns. So that's the leveraging of you know, content marketing and how that feeds into brand awareness and feeds into the go-to-market strategy that then kind of feeds out into hopefully having better calls with people. The next thing we're going to look at is data. And I just alluded to this earlier on, is that when you're looking at data and marketers, you are literally talking about two different types of people. And, you know, my experience has been, you know, the analytics brain is all about the data, and the marketer's brain is all about the creative. And the analytics don't appreciate the creative, and the marketing guys, you know, guys and girls, they're just looking at the world from a different lens. So when you talk about marketing data, it's literally an oxymoron. You've got to find a way of bringing those two together. And I think Dan mentioned it earlier, is you kind of do that through collecting this data and visualizing it. So this is probably the worst strategy you could have. I call it strategy 0, where you're basically taking your channels, you're collecting some data, and you're using Excel and populating some charts. Now, if you're not doing this, you know, I don't know if that's a bad thing. If you're doing this and you're happy with this, you've got to grow. So this is very much, you know, 2005 Google Analytics type data, MailChimp type data. It's really not telling you a huge amount, and all it's doing is telling you your trends. Now, from a, you know, marketer non-data point of view, this is probably, you know, the pinnacle of, you know, how good people like, you know, in that world operate. From someone who's a data analyst, this is, you know, this is ground zero. And it's really, how do you build on this, and how do you build on this visualization? So the way you kind of do that is kind of using tools, so you have a single view of your campaign. And this is really kind of the data visualization of your campaigns. And so you can basically see things like all your data is in one place. So you can see all your marketing activity here, and you can see in real time your inflows into the business and how that tallies into your marketing activities. You've got the ability as well to kind of, again, this is all in real time. This is connecting to CRM data. It's connecting to data, digital engagement data. It's connecting to investor data, and it's, you know, it's giving you a real-time report. So it's not a case of pulling this data in Excel and, you know, then massaging it and creating a dashboard. This is all kind of all being done in real time. So in this case, you know, somebody can go in and say, okay, here's all the interest from various countries. Okay, let's see in Belgium. That's interesting. Who are the people in Belgium that are showing an interest? And you can drill down on that data. And obviously, being a demo, it's not pulling any data out. So there we go. Congratulations. Anyhow, so that's my apologies. But you know, you can do things like, you know, which countries, which cities are showing an interest. You can actually then see, you know, which funds are performing the best, which ones aren't. And again, you know, the key thing here is how do you pull all this data into one place? So that's kind of a really good strategy to have. I know, Dan, you're doing quite a lot of this as well, aren't you?
Oh yeah.
And
I think when you first came out, this is, yeah, this is, you know, we actually have this kind of a tip. Paul came out with this Power BI visualization, which pulls in all of these different campaign analytics. And we said, hey, why don't we just put it in our CRM in an iframe? And an iframe, for anyone who grew up in the 90s and actually watched Mike Tyson, like myself, box in the 90s, you used to have a picture in picture, you know? So like, here's the TV screen, and then you could watch golf over here. It was kind of weird that, you know, like just turn the channel. But you can do that in a CRM through this thing called an iframe. And so it just gives you this little frame, a workspace, like one of these boxes, and you can see this campaign analytics dashboard right into your CRM. So you don't have to toggle between browsers. Like, this is totally awesome because, for instance, this timeline Paul's showing here, we have this integrated into every single investor profile. So when, you know, Paul Doss Sr. calls me on the phone, he's got $100 million with us, Paul's rich dad. We can see this timeline of when they're going, reading our stuff, watching our videos, going onto our Seamless Investor portal. Okay, that's point one. It's easy to do. You should do it. Point two is, unlike selling other things where data is an accurate extrapolation of the impact of your product, and here you can think about politics, you can think about tennis shoes again, you can think about music, you can say this indicative kind of person who lives in this place with this kind of culture probably statistically buys our product. That's not the case here. And so if you say, hey, this was a great campaign and people looked at it on LinkedIn, what does that mean, right? They're not buying tennis shoes. They're not buying cars. And that's why that kind of tactic doesn't work. So I think the important thing here is, if you go back to that Power BI, Paul, and it shows it here as well, is you got to translate that campaign into individual human beings, right? And certainly they might have a demographic. Again, maybe they're institutional investors, but like, it's more important to be like, hey, you know what? The reason we're doing this kind of letter versus that kind of letter is because it's more engaging, because more people like Aaron Cox right there that you see is looking at this. And then you can go into Aaron Cox's profile in your CRM or ProFundCom, as the case may be, and they should be integrated. And you'll be like, maybe we should call Aaron. Like, this guy wasn't looking at our stuff for years, and all of a sudden he's reading all of our letters about emerging markets and commodities. And that's why it's like hard to translate those two different marketing worlds. And this is like a nice way to do it, and you can pull it right into your CRM. I think this is great.
Yeah, and this is kind of the first, you know, that top-down view from, you know, 30,000 feet, and very, very quickly being able to drill down to say Aaron is somebody we need to contact. And then, you know, you've also got strategy two, is where you're able to deliver those marketing insights to your sales team. So what we have here is basically, what we have here, that's not the one, let me just go back. Here we go. So what we have here is the ability to say, right, here are your low-hanging fruits. So for Sally, over here, and the salespeople here, just for Sally in this case, you know, here are the people that are actively engaged with you, low-hanging fruit that you haven't spoken to yet. Cross-selling, here are the people who are investors in one product, but are looking at things they're not invested in. Redemption risk, here are your investors that are not engaging with anything you've sent them. And marketing alpha, these are basically people who have not engaged with you, just like Dan said, for the past 6 months, but in the last month are actually showing interest in one of your particular funds. So essentially, what this has done, is that instead of for a salesperson calling somebody from A to Z or Z to A or somewhere in the middle, it's effectively helping them have better conversations and make better connections, because these are people who are actively engaged in one form or the other. So, and when we built the product day one, 20 years ago, the goal of the product was, how can I make the sales team, 20% more efficient? How can I get them calling people, who are interested? And as time's gone on, the way that's changed is that now, 20 years ago, we just had email as a data point. Now we have email, Zoom, On24, Investor Portal, social, physical events, integrating data from products like Dakota and Broadridge and all these other products. So the data points are huge. And so what you want to basically do is then take that data and just generate these signals for your sales team. And what we've done in these buckets, we've just made it that much easier for a salesperson to kind of look at who are the people they need to call today. A couple of questions have come through on this. Just bear with me as I bring them up. So we've got, how easily does this integrate with CRMs like HubSpot and Salesforce? So it integrates seamlessly into Salesforce. HubSpot, slightly different. HubSpot is not that well, its API is not as good as Salesforce, but we can find a way to do the integration. So that's kind of that. Dan, question for you from Richard. Can you see these questions, Dan, by the way?
Yeah, let me go down here. Yes, I can. Here we go. Okay, Richard. How are you, my friend?
So the question is, how do you balance
Yeah.
persistence versus consideration when reaching out to prospective investors, not being annoying? What insights do you use from your data tools to help you in that decision? Lastly, do those insights inform how you reach out, prospective calls versus email or LinkedIn message?
Yeah, Richard, that's a fantastic question. So these kind of rules of thumb, these 4 boxes, low-hanging fruit, we've customized some of those with Paul and his team, which is incredible about Paul's team. Like, he's willing to craft to a certain extent, just making this product better for you as a sales professional. Like, there's no doubt, compared to what some of our other service providers we've used in the past. And then, okay, well, we bring this data into Dynamo in this case. And so let's look at a real life example. There's an endowment. I actually spoke to this gentleman the other day, and he started at his current position 14 years ago when I started working here at Equinox, started building this department. And, he hadn't engaged with anything in like years and years. Now, we've been using ProFundCom for 3 years. Prior to that, we used MailChimp. So that's how I had that data. And all I had to do, and this is, I think, super important, like, the higher you are in the funnel, kind of like pre-qualified leads, whatever you want to call them, you can be a little more pushy and automated, right? You can send out, and I call it a smart link. It's basically a ProFundCom specific link that says, hey, Richard, got your name from so-and-so. We went to school together. Here's our fund. Check out this link. That link goes to our investor portal, so I can see whether or not you clicked it. Well, like, clearly I can be a little more automated there, right? I can say, hey, if he doesn't click the link, send him another email in 2 days. And I can stay on top of that with the workflow in my CRM. But obviously, as I get to know you a little more, you're exactly right. It would be super annoying. And that's the reason where, if we automate that, where I brought up this example of my friend at this endowment, where I'm like, what's his personality like? Let me look back at past activities. you know, let's check them out on LinkedIn today, and then you can make that prudential decision. So I think the like important distinction here is, I think mostly everyone sitting in this seat in this very competitive industry has really good soft skills. So like trust your soft skills. Like you know how to reach out, you know how to talk to people. It's not that the technical skills are lacking, but it was just difficult to do those technical skills, either because the service providers didn't exist, right? Or your compliance department didn't let you do it. So now you can combine those two sides of the brain, I guess we can say, with those soft skills that you naturally have with kind of like a much faster vehicle. Like you're a good driver, get in a faster car. And now that you are empowered with that, you can be like, hey, dude, I should reach out to Richard. It's been a while. He's been reading our stuff. I know he likes emerging markets. Let me just ping him, right? And that's where you just trust your gut. And that's where automation fails and the human brain takes over. We talk a lot about that internally. And I think another thing is, this is what's cool about content. We went to go meet a very big endowment, and this friend of mine there, I've known him for a long time. He's like, you know, I have a question about commodity companies, that they tend to be higher quality. Like, how do you, what is the competitive advantage of a commodity company? So we went back, we're like, we should make a video about this, 5 minutes with our CIO. It looks good. And I'll send it right to that person. That's pretty sweet. Because then people in your network, your prospects, know you're making content just for certain people based on questions that have come up. And then you get the data back. And I bet you that kind of engagement gets, well, that kind of content gets far better engagement, much better data. So that's how we do it. And I would just say, trust your gut. You obviously know what you're doing. You're on this call.
Super. And I think, Steve, you've got a question there. Hopefully that answers your question as well about marketing effort versus automated outreach. So that's great. So that's ultimately strategy 2, how to build better conversations. Finally, what we're going to just talk about as we kind of getting to the end of this webinar is compliance. You know, death, taxes, compliance. So this week, the SEC have just again released another iteration of these rules. I know they come back from 1940, but basically, you know, tell no lies, basically, is I think the general rule of communications. But when you are a marketer, making sure what you're sending out is compliant is incredibly critical. And, you know, I can't stress enough to have the compliance team on board, making sure you've got, you know, your timeline set up in your content plan to get your content approved. What you can do is, you know the rules, have a compliance program, you know, make sure you have disclaimers and legal review in your processes. Interestingly, our product, because we're very much focused around the funds space, has an AI component that allows you to kind of check based on the rules that you're following, the compliance rules you're following. It will go through your email and make some basic checks for you. But that, you know, we're not in any way taking on any liability. But again, a useful use of AI to kind of add to your process. So once you've got your compliance sorted out, I think, you know, you're going to be successful in your fund marketing. And it is fund marketing, not marketing. Very different. Marketing, you know, there are lots of ways to be fantastic at it. But fund marketing has a whole bunch of nuances. We've got a QA session now, and Atul's actually raised a question. So he says, we run a residential fund in Canada. We're seeking to target prospective retail investors and institutional. In your opinion, what is the human resources we should allocate budget to manage, maintain a ProFundCom system? We're operating for 10 years, mainly with friends and family. We're planning on launching a campaign to our local market, which is 10 million people in Ontario, and the Bay Street hub on TO. In essence, what's an operational budget? So there is a formula for this, bizarrely. So there are two formulas to this. The first formula is work out the lifetime value of an investor in your business. So your LTV. Okay, so that's just a classic marketing ratio. And then you work out, so let's say your LTV for a lifetime value of an investor, keep the numbers round, is $100,000. Okay, so that's your lifetime value. From that, you work out how much are you willing to spend per lead. And that is an incredibly useful metric. Because if you want to spend $1 a lead, so your cost of acquisition, your ratio is 1 to 100,000. And that ratio is just does not stack up. Your ratios roughly need to be 80 to 1. And it changes for various industries. So basically, you're kind of talking about, you know, you have to be willing to spend something like $800 per lead. So that kind of works out roughly what your budget needs to be. So, you know, just saying I'm going to buy HubSpot or MailChimp, it's the non-sophisticated way to do fund marketing. The sophisticated way is actually working out your ratios. So when you kind of feed back into this, you know, if you speak to some of our clients, they're saying, look, we want to raise 100 million. So the total we are going to spend on our marketing is $1 million. Okay, it's that one, and that includes social spend, you know, Google spend, content spend, you know, Martech spend, all that kind of stuff. Now, you know, and you may say, well, that's way too much, but that's kind of gives you the orders of magnitude. Now, it could be $500,000, it could be $250,000, but those are the magnitudes, order of magnitudes you're kind of talking about. And as far as, yeah, so that would be how I would look at it. Your LTV to CAC ratio is how you're going to spend. And again, you kind of get down that road is the more domain specific product you buy, like, you know, from MailChimp all the way to Marketo and Pardot, which are generic, to ProFundCon, that's specific, you know, the cost kind of goes up because our addressable market gets smaller and smaller. So I don't know if I've answered that question at all, but you've got my email. If you want me to explain that further, please do.
Can I add something to that real quick?
Sure.
Because I think what Atul is saying is like, this is a pretty comprehensive marketing campaign. I would say that there's 3 things you want to do. You want to get your overall strategy. What are the specific tactics? This is somewhat retail, and what are the systems driving that? And a part of this system is your tracking engine, and that's ProFundCom. As a part of your overall marketing spend, it's going to be de minimis. Like Paul can give you the pricing, so it's his business, but it's going to be de minimis compared to like actually your legwork. I think lifetime customer value is pretty good. This is a little more retail-y, but I think it's like super important. Like when you're looking at your strategy, like in-house, we use Murano, which is a third-party, not marketer, but CapIntro team. We have CapIntro. We go to conferences. We have databases. We have all this stuff. Dakota. It all feeds into our CRM. That works for us. When you're talking about 10 million people in Ontario, Canada, which is the entire province, it's like a third of the entire population of Canada. There's data mining companies. There's more retail-oriented companies that have their own data that can feed into your system, and that's going to cost money. I know one of these guys. They're based in Texas. They do this kind of thing, and then that kind of like administrative part. You know, happy to talk about that too. But you know, we're spending on CRM, data transfers, data lakes, Paul, and a few other things that I think for a fund our size, it's kind of a premium, but I think the important thing is it gives you a lot of scale. I think all the things I just talked about, if you wanted to hire internally, would probably be 10x. Like go ahead and try to build Novus internally. You can't do it. It would cost 10 million bucks, you know? And so, yeah, I think in conclusion, I would separate this into 2 parts. What are the strategies and tactics to reach out to those specific tactics? What are the costs for each of those things? And then on the systems front, it's just going to be a rounding error compared to that outreach, in my opinion.
Yeah, and ultimately, you know, all your marketing has to, no matter how you look at it, whatever money you spend on it, whatever personnel you bring into the business, they need to be able to say, right, here's our narrative, here's our brand, here's our demand generation, here's how we're doing engagement, and here's how we're measuring those analytics. That is the go-to-market strategy. And marketing is all about this go-to-market strategy, and you can't get away from this, no matter how much people try and say we just build a website and it'll be fine. Okay, I'm just seeing if there are any more questions.
Something about content creation.
Yeah. So you're right. So do you offer any content creation services? No, we don't. There are lots of good content creation companies out there. I think, yeah, I mean, I think Apex Fund Services, there's a guy called John Green. He's incredibly good. Apex, John Green. And again, it just depends on where, your market segment, industry experts. You've got to find those people. As far as creating content from webinars, and you just need a financial writer to be able to create that for you. So that's a very, and you can probably if you contact any journalist, they should be able to put you in touch with someone who writes industry specific content.
Okay. I think too, for content, we've done Wall Street Journal op-eds. We've done master classes in gold mining that have got pretty good coverage. The research room that I talked about. I think a few things that are kind of notable. If you go to I live in Greenwich, Connecticut. If you have a contractor come to Greenwich, it's going to be 2x. And that's the same thing in the alternative industry. And you're going to end up paying, there's really good agencies out there, but ultimately you have to identify either the graphic designer or the video person that can craft this content, but you really have to know what you want, because you can have a 50-minute video that costs $100,000 that no one's going to watch.
Yeah. 100%.
For our research room, we were quoted $365,000. We did it not even close to that. I would recommend this guy, Stevie Reese. He's a creative guy. He's not a finance guy. That's what you want. You don't want a non-creative person in your seat, and you don't want a finance person making videos. You don't. And he's able to work with you, and you can create these videos pretty quickly. But you got to know what you want, because everyone's going to try to take your money, so to speak. So start with that, and then, what's your message? What makes you unique? And how can you get it out in a unique way pretty quickly to your target market? Yeah, content's king. You got to do it.
Yeah, super. Well, thank you all very much. There are no more questions, I believe. Well, we will be sending out a replay, so that should be with you over the weekend. Once again, Dan, thanks again for being so generous with your time and just sharing how you've been, tackling marketing campaigns and the data and the analytics and, the whole sales enablement process. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar. And have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.